Let's use Dioxus to build a ToDo app. Here we get two dummy data, work and jog. If the ToDo item is completed, it will get a green check marker. If the ToDo item is not completed, it will get a red X. Here we got a button. If the ToDo item is completed, it will have a button uncompleted. We click this, it will change this ToDo item to uncompleted. It will change the green check marker to the red X. And also this button will change to complete. We can click this button again to complete this ToDo item. So it will change to the green check marker and the button will become uncompleted. We can click this ToDo item to see the details of this ToDo item. Its ID is 0, content is work, status is true. We can click this button to go back to the ToDo list. We also can click this remove button to remove the ToDo item. So we remove the first ToDo item. We can remove the last ToDo item. Here is the input field. We can add a new ToDo, like drink water. Then we click this add button. It will add a new ToDo to our ToDo list. We can click this button to complete this ToDo item or remove this. When there is no ToDo items, it will show us no ToDos. First, in our desktop, let's create a new folder. Let's give it a name project. In terminal, let's type a cd and drag this folder to the terminal and press enter. We will change the directory to this project folder. So in this project folder, let's generate a new Dioxus project. So we will run dx new. Let's give it a name ToDo. Press enter. Support template, we will choose this first one, bare bones. It will be the basic template. For stack, we will choose false. Router, we will choose true. We will use router. Taiwan CSS, we will choose true. We will use Taiwan CSS for styling. We will serve our application on web, so we will choose the first web. So let's open this folder project. You can see it will generate a new folder ToDo. Let's close this terminal. Let's drag this ToDo to our Visual Studio Code. Let's go to the src folder. Go to the main.rs file. Let's remove all. We will build from scratch. First, we will add an attribute allow non-snake case. So we can name our component first letter be uppercase. Then let's import Dioxus. So use Dioxus prelude asterisk. Then let's create our main function, fn main. Let's create our first app component. So fn will give it a name app component. It will start uppercase A. Returning type will be element from Dioxus. Let's also add an attribute for this component app. So attribute will be component. In this app component, let's just first render hello world. In main function, let's call launch function. Then we'll pass this app component into this function as argument. Let's open a new terminal in our Visual Studio Code. In terminal, let's run dx serve port 4001. Press enter. Let's go to the web browser. In web browser, let's visit localhost 4001. Press enter. You can see it will show hello world. It means our web application works fine. Let's define a struct type for the ToDo item. So struct, let's give it a name ToDo. We'll add 3 fields to this struct. First will be ID, give it a type of size. Second will be content, give it a type string. Last field, give it a name completed, type will be bool. And because we will share this ToDo item across components, let's add an attribute derive partial equal and colon. Let's also define a second structure for the to-do list to store the to-do items. So structure, give the name to-do list. We will only add one field, is list. Type will be a vector hold this to-do item to-do. We also will share this to-do list across components. So let's add an attribute partial equal and colon for this to-do list structure. Let's define a home component for our home page. So let's define a component fn, give the name home. Return type will be element. Let's add an attribute component for this home. First, let's just render home. Let's add a router for our application. So let's create a enum router. Let's add the root path. So will be the home component. Home. Let's add an attribute for this home component. Root, give it a path slash. Let's add an attribute for this enum router. We will add an attribute derive, rootable, and partial equal and colon. Then let's render this root in this app component. In app component, in RSX macro, we will call router component. Use TurboFish syntax will specify the router type. We define this enum type for this router component. Then let's go to the web browser. You can see our home page will show the home component, show the content home. Let's create another component. Fn, give the name title. Return type will be element. Let's add a attribute component for this component title. Then we will return RSX macro. In this macro, let's add a h1 element. We will render content to-do app. We want to always show this title component in our web application. So we will put this title component in this app component. So title. Let's use Taiwan CSS for styling. Before we use it, we need to do some settings. We need to install Taiwan CSS. To install Taiwan CSS, we will use npm. To use npm, we need to install Node.js. So you need to go to this website nodejs.org to download Node.js, then install Node.js, then you can use the npm. Let's open a new terminal. We will run npm install -d uppercase D Taiwan CSS to install Taiwan CSS. Then we need to link this Taiwan.css file in this SS folder to our project. So in Dioxus toml file, find this style. In this pair of square brackets, let's add this path is double quotation marks slash isites slash Taiwan.css. Last, in terminal, in our root directory of this to-do app project, we need to run npx Taiwan css -i ./input.css -o /ss Taiwan.css --watch and press enter. Then let's restart our server. Let's press Ctrl+C to shut down our server. Then let's run dxserve port 4001, press enter. Let's go to this title component. Let's add a class. Let's give it a class text rows 500 to see if the Taiwan CSS works. Let's go to the web browser. This to-do app will be the color rows 500 from Taiwan CSS. It means Taiwan CSS works fine. Let's add some style for this title. Let's add a margin my 5. It will add a margin top and a margin bottom 5. Then let's move this title to the center. So will be text center. Let's give it a color text orange 500. Then let's give it a size text 5XL. Let's change this title to be to-do list. In app component, let's create some dummy data for this to-do list. So let's create a to-do list equal to to-do list, and field list. Let's create a vector. In this vector, let's add two to-do item. To-do ID. First item, we will give it ID 0. Content. Let's give it a content jog to string. Completed. Let's give it a boolean value true. Let's add a second to-do item. To-do ID, we give it a 1. Content, we give it a worker to string. Completed, we give it a value false. Let's share this to-do list across components. We use context provider to share this to-do list. We'll pass a closure and return a signal new. We'll pass this to-do list in this new function. So not only we can share this to-do list across components, we also can modify this to-do list across components. Let's create a list component to display each item in this to-do list. We will put that list component in separate file. In this src folder, let's create a folder. Give the name components. In this components, let's create a file mode rs. So this component folder will be parent module. In main.rs file, let's add this components as a module to our project. Mode components. Let's go back to this components folder. Let's create another file. Give it a name list.rs. And let's add this list file to this components module as a submodule. So in this mode.rs file, let's add a pub mode list. In list file, let's import Dioxus. So use Dioxus prelude asterisk. Then let's create a component. We will add the pub keyword to make it public. F1, give the name list. Start with uppercase L. Return type will be element rsx. Let's first run the list. Let's add an attribute component to this public function list. Let's go back to main.rs file. Let's import that list component. So we'll call use components list. Let's add this list component to this home component. So list. Let's go to a web browser. You can see it will show the list. Let's go back to the list file. First, let's use context hook to get the to-do list we shared by this use context provider. So let's create a variable, give it a name to-do list signal equal to use context. We will use turbofish syntax to add a type annotation. We pass this use context provider its signal hold this to-do list. So its type will be signal hold the to-do list. Let's import this to-do list use create a to-do list. Here, its D is uppercase. In RSX macro, let's create a if-else expression. If its to-do list signal, we will call read method on its signal. Its read method will read the to-do list in this signal. So let's call the list to get the list in this to-do list. Then let's call len method to get the length of this list. If this length equal to 0, it means there is no to-do items in this list. So let's render div element. Let's give it a class text center and text give it a size XL. Let's render content no to-dos. Let's add else. In this else block, let's add a div element. Let's add a class. We will give it a class height. We will give it a screen. So its height will be screen height. Width we will give it a 4. Then we will add a flex. Give it a justify center. So it will center its div horizontally. In its div element, let's add a URL element. Let's add a class. We will give it a width 50%. So its URL will be 50% of this div's width. In its URL element, let's add a pair of curly brackets. So we can use map method to map each item in this to-do list. To-do list signal, we also will call read method to read the to-do list in this signal. Then let's call the list to get the list. Then we will call iter method to create an iterator from its list. Then we will call map method. Its map method will take a closure as argument. Its closure can capture each to-do item, so let's give it a name item. In its closure body, we will return rsx macro. In its macro, we will create a list element. Let's add a class for its list element. We'll add a class flex and justify between and items center. Give it a background color bj slate 100. And let's add a padding px2 and py also 2. Let's round the border, so give it a border rounded. Then let's add a hover. When we hover on this element, let's change this background color to 200. In this list element, let's create a div element. Div. Let's add a class. We'll give it a class flex. Let's first render this item's content in this div element. So item content in this div element. Then let's add a if else. If this item the completed is true, then we will render another div element with content a check marker. We will press Option V to get a check marker. Then let's add a class to this div element. We will give it a color green. So text lime 500. Then we will give it a margin left 2. Here let's add a comma. Else. If this complete is false, we will render div element with content an uppercase X. Let's give it a class text rows 500 and also margin left 2. Here should have a hyphen margin left 2. Let's add a comma here. Let's go to the web browser. I think we should restart our server. So let's shut down our server, press Ctrl C. Then let's restart our server. Let's go to the web browser. You can see it will show the each to-do item in its to-do list. And with content, and if this is completed, it will get a green check marker. If this is not completed, it will show a red X. Let's add a margin between each item. So in its list element, let's add a margin bottle MB2. Let's go to the web browser. Here you can see each item will have a margin. Let's add a single to-do component to display the detail about one specific to-do item. So in components folder, let's create a new file, give it a name single todo.rs. Let's add this file as module to this components. So in this mod.rs file, we will add a pub mod single to do. In single to do file, let's first import Dioxus prelude asterisk. Then let's create a function component hyphen, give it name single to do, will return element. Let's add an attribute component. Let's render RSX macro. Let's render single to do. Because we will go to the single to do by ID, we will add a proper ID. Give it a type uSize to this component. So in this, let's render this ID. Let's go to the main.rs file. In main.rs file, let's add a root to this single to do component. So let's add a in this root enum, let's add a root we will give it a path to do slash to make this path dynamic. We will add a colon before ID, so this ID will be dynamic. Let's pass this single to do component to this root, and let's import this single to do. So in its components, let's import a single to do. We forgot to make the single to do function to be public, so let's go back to this single to do.rs file. Let's add a pub keyword before this function. Here, let's import this single to do component. And we will pass this ID as props to this single to do. Here we add this ID as props. So in this root, in this component, we will add an ID. Type will be uSize. Let's go to the list.rs file. Here we will change this item content in a link. So when we click this link, it will go to the single to do component. Let's create a link component. We'll add an attribute 2 to the root. We will import this root from main.rs file. It's root enum. So in this use creator, also root to root a single to do. Then we will pass the ID from this to do item. Let's get the ID from this item. So is map method closure body. Let's create a variable ID equal to item the ID. Then we will pass this ID. Then let's render content is to item content. Let's go to the web browser. Here you can see this item content will be a link. We can click this link. Let's click this link. So you can see it will go to the single ToDo component and show the ID is 0. Here visitor URL is todo/0. Let's go back and click a second one. Second one ID will be 1. Let's go to the single ToDo RS file. Let's use context hook to get the to-do list. So let's create a variable, give the name to-do list signal equal to, we call use context. Then we need to specify the type is signal to-do list import from create to-do list. Then let's find the to-do of this ID in this to-do list. Let's create a variable, give the name to-do option equal to, we will call to-do list signal read method to read the to-do list in this signal. Then we will call list to get the list from this to-do list. Then let's call iter method to create an iterator from this to-do list. Then we will call find method to find the to-do item. It will take closure as argument, and this closure can capture each item in this list. So let's give it a name item. If this item the ID equal to the ID we get from this props, then it will return that to-do item in a sum. So you can see this type is option hold the reference to do. We will call clone the method to clone the inner value of this to do. So you can see its type will change to option hold to do. Then let's remove this RxX macro. Let's use match expression to handle this to do option. So match to do option. If this option is null, it means it not find the to do item of this ID. So we will return Rx macro. In this macro, let's add a div element. Let's add a class. We'll give it a class flex and justify center. Let's also add a margin y 5. In this div element, let's add a h1 element. Let's give it a class text size 5xl. Let's render content no to do ID of this ID found. Let's add a second arm sum. So if it return a sum, we'll hold that to do item. So let's give it a name to do is sum. Also, we will return RSX macro. In this macro, we will create a div element class. We give it a flex and justify center and margin y 5. In this div element, let's add another div element. Let's add a class. Let's make this div element like a card. So we will add a class border solid and border slate 100 border 2 and rounded. Let's give it a padding 1. In this div element, let's create a div element. Let's give it a class text 3xl. In this div, let's add a h1 element. In this h1 element, let's render the ID of this ToDo's ID. Then let's create another h1 element content. It's ToDo content and completed ToDo completed. Let's go to the web browser. Let's click first item. I think we should restart our server. So let's press Ctrl C and restart our server. Here you can see it will show the single ToDo item is ID is 0, content is jog, completed is true. Let's go back and click a second ToDo item. You can see ID is 1, content is work, complete is false. Let's add a button to go back. So let's create a navigator. So let's create a variable, give it a navigator equal to, we will call use navigator to create a new navigator. In this non-arm, in this div element, let's create a button. Let's add a on-click event. Move. We will call navigator.goBack method. Then we will give it a content go back. Let's also add a class for this button. Let's give it a background color BJ slate 50 and give it a padding 1. Give it a border rounded and let's add a hover. Let's change the background to BJ slate 100. Let's copy this button. Also, we will add a button to this sum arm. So in the second div element, let's add this button. Let's go to the web browser. Let's click this ToDo item. So you can see it will get a button. We can click this button, go back to the ToDo list. Let's create a remove button. We will make this remove button as a component. So in this components folder, let's create a new file. Give it a name remove todo.rs. Let's add this file to the module of these components. So in this model.rs file, let's add a pub mode remove todo. Let's go back to remove todo.rs file. First, let's import Dioxus prelude asterisk. Let's create a function component f1. Give it a name remove todo. Returning type will be element. Is let's just first render remove. Let's add a attribute component for this function. Let's add a pub keyword before this function, so it will be public. We can import this button in list. Let's go to the list.rs file. In this file, here let's go to this list. In this else here, in this list element, we will create another div element after the first div element. So let's add a div element. Then we'll put this remove ToDo component in this div element. Let's import this remove ToDo component. So use create components remove ToDo. Let's go to the web browser. You can see here we got a remove in this ToDo item. Let's pass this ToDo list signal and its ID as props to this remove ToDo components. So in remove ToDo components, let's add two props. First is ToDo list signal. Type will be signal. Hold to-do list. Second will be ID. Type will be usize. Then in this list, let's pass this to-do list signal and ID into this component as props. In this RSX macro, let's create a button. Let's add a class to this button. Let's give it a text color slate 50, and let's give it a background color rose 500. Let's round the border, so rounded. Let's give it a padding 1. Let's add a hover. We'll change the background color to rose 600. Let's also add a margin left 2. Let's add an on-click event. Let's create a closure. We will move the ownership to the closure. We will not capture the event. In this closure body, let's create a variable, give it a name new list equal to. We will use to-do list signal the read method to read the to-do list from its to-do list signal. Then we will call list field to get the list. Then we will call clone method to clone that list. Then let's call iter method to create an iterator from this list. Then let's call filter method. Filter. This filter method will take closure as argument. This closure can capture each item from this list. So let's give it a name item. We will pass a condition. If this item ID is not equal to the ID we get from this props, then it will return that item to this iterator. If item's ID equal to this ID, then we will not return that item to this iterator, so we will remove this item. Then let's call map method. Let's map each item we return to this list. And this map method will take a closure as argument. It can capture each item. Then we will return item.clone to clone that item. We will return the clone of item to the list. Last, let's call collect method. Let's add a turbofish syntax. Give it a type annotation. Will be a vector. Hold the to-do item. To-do. So we will import a to-do from create to-do. Here is clone method. We forget a pair of parentheses. Here also this iter method, a pair of parentheses. Then we will set this new list to this to-do list signal. So to-do list signal the set, we will call set method. Then we will create a new to-do list, and the list field will be the value of this new list. Last, let's give this button a content. Remove. Let's restart our server. Let's go to the web browser. Here you can see we got a red button, remove. We can remove item by clicking this button. Let's add another button to toggle the complete of the to-do item. So let's create a new file in its components. Give it the name toggle completed rs. Let's add this file as a module. So in mode rs file, let's add pub mode toggle completed. Is toggle completed file. Let's import Dioxus prelude. Let's create a public function component. Pub f1, give it the name ToDo completed. Will return element. Let's return RSX macro. Let's just render content toggle. Let's add an attribute component. Let's go to the list.rs file. Let's import this toggle complete component to this list. So is components. Let's import toggle completed and toggle completed. Let's add this component in its second div. Above this remove ToDo button. So toggle completed. And we also will pass the to-do list single ID and also the completed from the to-do item to this toggle completed component as props. So in this toggle completed file, in this component, let's add props. To-do list signal type will be signal holder to-do list. The ID will be your size. Completed will be a boolean value bool. In this list, let's get the completed from the item. So let's create a variable, give it a name completed equal to item dot completed. Then let's pass the to-do list signal and its ID is completed to this toggle completed component. First will be to-do list signal, second will be ID, third will be completed. Let's go to the web browser. You can see we get another button. Let's go back to toggle completed file. It is RSX macro. Let's create a if blocker. If completed is true, then we want to click a button to change its completed to false. So let's create a button. In this button, let's add a class. We'll give it a class text color slate 50. Let's give it a BJ background color orange 500. Let's give it a padding 1. Let's round the border, give it a border rounded. Let's add a hover. When we hover this, let's change this BJ background color to orange 600. Let's add an on-click event. On-click move. In this on-click event, let's create a variable, give it a name new list equal to, let's call to-do list signal that we'll call read method to read a to-do list from this signal. Then let's call list field to get the list. Then let's call clone method to clone that list. Then let's call iter method to create an iterator from that list. Then let's call map method to map each item from this list. It will take closure. This closure capture each item. Let's give it a name item. Yes, closure body. Let's create a if blocker. If this item ID equal to the ID we get from this prop ID. So then we will change this item's complete to false. Let's return new to-do item to replace this item. So to-do, we will import a to-do from creator. ID will be the same ID. Content will be the same content. Item.content.colon. Completed will be the object completed. After this if block, let's add else block. Else, we will not change that to-do item, so we will return that item colon. So we will return the colon of that item. Then after this map method, here we will add a collect the method to make that iterator back to a vector hold a to-do item. Then still in this onClick event, let's call to-do list signal.set method to set this new list to the to-do list. So we will create a new to-do list. List field will be this new list. Let's add a content to this button. So we want this button to uncomplete the to-do. We give it a content uncomplete. After this if completed block, let's add else. So this else means it's completed is false. When we click the button, it will change it to true. So let's copy this button. Let's add to this else block. Let's change this class to background color to BJ sign 500. Here, hover also change it to BJ sign 600. Here, we will change this content to complete. Let's restart our server. Ctrl C. Let's go to the web browser. You can see it will get a uncompleted and a completed button. When this to-do item is completed, it will get a button uncompleted. So let's click this button. It will change this to-do item to uncompleted. When this to-do item is uncompleted, we can click this complete button to change it to completed. Let's change this complete button's background to here. Let's change this background color to BJ lime 500 and hover to BJ lime 600. That will look a little bit better. Is toggle completed? Let's make some change. Let's copy this button. Let's only add one button. And here, let's add a if else block for this content. So if the completed is true, then we will return uncompleted. Else will return value complete. Also, this class we will add a if else. So if complete will return this. Else will return class from its second button. Then let's remove this if else block. Let's go to the web browser. Let's click this button. It will do the same as before. Let's add a last component to our project. Is add a new to-do. So in components file, let's add a component. Give it a name. Add a todo.rs. Let's add this file to our module. So in mode.rs file, let's add a pub mode add to-do. Let's go to this add to-do.rs file. Let's import Dioxus prelude. Let's create a public function. Give the name add to-do. We'll return element. rx micro. Let's add a content, add a ToDo. Let's add a attribute component. For this, add ToDo. Let's go to the main.rs file. Let's import this add ToDo. So in components, let's add ToDo. We will add this add ToDo component to this home component above this list component. So let's add this add ToDo component. Here you can see in web browser we have this add ToDo component. Let's go to the add ToDo file. Here let's create a state. Let's create a mutable variable, give it a name ToDo content. We use this state to get the value from input. So let's use signal hook. Let's pass a closure. We will return our initial value is an empty string. So we will call string new function. Let's get the to-do list. Let to-do list signal equal to, we'll call use context to get the to-do list. Let's add a type is signal to-do list. In RSX macro, let's create a div element. Let's add a class. We give it a flex and justify center and width, give it a full. Let's add a margin y, give it a 2. In this div element, let's add a form element. Let's add a class for this form. We will give it a width 50%. In this form, let's add an input element. Here, let's add a comma. Let's add a class. We will give it a class width. We will give it a 75%. And then let's give it a padding 1. Let's give it a border 2. And give it a border color slate 100, border solid, and give it a rounded to round the border. Then let's add a type for this input. So will be text. Let's add a value attribute will be the initial value. It is ToDo content. Then let's add an onInput event. Move. We will capture the event E. Then we will set the new value from this event E to this ToDo content. So ToDo content set E value. Let's restart our server. Let's go to the web browser. You can see we got an input field. Let's add a button to this form. So let's create a element button. Let's add a class. Let's give it a class text color. We give it a slate 50. Background color, we give it a BJ sky 500. Let's give it a padding 1. Let's give it a border rounded. Let's give it a width 25%. So 1/4. This input field width is 75. So the last will be 25%. Let's also add a hover. We'll change the background color to BJ sky 600. Then let's add an onClick event. OnClick. Move. We will not use the event. So let's give it a underscore. It's on click event. First, let's get the to-do list equal to, we will call to-do list signal read method to read the to-do list from the signal. We will dereference this, then colon this to get the to-do list. Then let's create a new to-do. Let to-do equal to to-do. We will import this to-do from creator. So let's import a to-do. First field is ID. We will create a if else expression in this ID field. So if this to-do list we will call len method to get the length equal to 0. This means there is no to-do items in this list. So we will give it ID 0. Else we will get the ID of the last item from this list, then increase that by 1. So it will be to-do list the last method. Then we will call unwrap to handle that last. Then we will call ID to get the ID field, then +1. Second field is content. We will get the content from this input field's value. So we will get from this to-do content signal. So to-do content signal, we call read method to read the value from this to-do content. Then we need also dereferences. Then colon that value. And completed, we will give it a default false. Then let's push this new to-do to this to-do list. So here, to-do list, the list, and we should make this to-do list mutable. So let's add a mute keyword before this to-do list. The push will pass this to-do as argument. Last, let's set this new to-do list to this to-do list signal. So to-do list signal the set method. We will pass this to-do list. After we add this new to-do to the list, we also need to change this input field value to be an empty string. So here, to-do content.set, we will give it a value empty string. So string new. Last, let's add a content to this button. Will be here. Let's give it a value add. Here we got an error. We forgot to make this to-do list signal to be mutable. Here, let's add the mute keyword in front of this to-do list signal. Let's add an attribute disabled for this button. Then we will create a if else. If the to-do content, we will call toString to convert to a string. Then we call trim method to trim the white space around this string. If that string equal to an empty string, then we will return true. So this button will be disabled. Else will return false. Let's change this form element to div element. Let's go to the web browser. Here we got an input field and a button add. If there is no content in this input field, we can't click this add button. If we type a white space, we also can't click this button. Let's add a new to-do like drink water. Let's click this add button. It will add to our to-do list. We can click this content to go to the single page of this to-do item to see the detail. ID is 2, content is drink water, completed is false. Let's go back. We can click this button to complete this to-do item or incomplete this to-do item. We can remove to-do item. We can remove all to-do items. I think we just finished our to-do list application. Hope see you next time.